Sure, if
Hey,
I
Pam,
could.
could I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
All right. So, as we discussed in last week's podcast, the Epstein client list apparently does not exist. And there's been quite a bit of backlash, I would say, actually, ever since Trump came out and claimed this. And it kind of came as a shock to me because I think my assumption was that ultimately, to his base, it wouldn't matter that much that he's lying about it. But it seems to have actually really touched a nerve with his base, especially people who were maybe a little more Trump skeptical. So I'm thinking more independent-minded people. Examples of this include media personalities like comedians like Shane Gillis, Andrew Schultz. I saw a clip of him saying that he was not in favor of it. It seems to have caused a rift, and even among the more hardcore folks, it seems to a lot of people don't like it. Where do you think this goes? Is this like an Afghanistan moment for Biden, where it looks really bad and his approval rating never recovers and it kind of just dips down and plateaus a little? Or do you think Trump's base will come crawling back and he'll still just hover around high 30s, low 40s ad infinitum? What do you
Well,
think?
well, it's tough because and we've discussed this off air a couple of times, but I do think that this is potentially his Afghanistan moment, and I know that that sounds absolutely crazy because for all intents and purposes, this is a conspiracy theory. I mean, nothing has been vindicated yet. I mean, I know you and I are, people really do believe in this, so but it's yet to be vindicated. So it should be interesting to watch this pan out. But if they don't get anything other than the full unedited Epstein files, that doesn't vindicate exactly what they believe. I mean, this is kind of the danger of a conspiracy theory base is, once you don't follow through, then it's not going to matter, it is very weird because this would not at all be disqualifying for like a Democratic candidate or even like a mainstream Republican candidate. They would just be like, oh, he's part of the swamp. He's part of the swamp. But the fact that Trump like almost campaigned on being this guy that was going to drain the swamp. He was going to fix Washington. He was going to do everything he could to get all the corruption out of there, which, obviously that wasn't true for me. But if you believed that full-heartedly, and then this is your big kahuna. This is your Mecca. And Donald Trump, I mean, literally, from their perspective, is now a part of the cover-up. So I could totally see this if it continues, which I'm not sure that it will. It just depends on how much steam it gets. This could like ruin his presidency if he lets it. Just because he's losing the most vital core of his base on an issue that ultimately means very little substantively. Very, which is hilarious because I've already seen it. They're already, and I'm sorry I'm monopolizing here, but
No, you're fine.
we're
You're
already
fine.
seeing the same people that once they felt the courage to speak out about this, they started talking about like, well, I mean, how many people are he even deporting? We were told mass deportations. Are we even getting that? They haven't released any numbers. And they're already, once you're more willing to question, that's what starts the snowball downhill. And I think there is a chance, at least, that we could be seeing that. It just kind of depends.
Yeah, I do think there is, because I've witnessed things just in this past week or so. There is like a growing rift, especially between the less cultish members of his fan base. I'm thinking like Joe Rogan and characters such as that. Apparently Joe Rogan at privately asked Trump to like ease up on the deportations. So even though it's a little off topic, deportations, that is a Trump promise, much like releasing a bunch of these files that the conspiracy theorists want to get their hands on, JFK, 9/11, RFK, stuff like that. Even though, I guess, in fairness to Trump, he actually kind of said in interviews past that he was uncomfortable with releasing the Epstein files. Not a good look, but he did say that.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah, I do wonder. I do wonder. It's a mystery. But all that to say, it is interesting because, I wonder with these figures like Joe Rogan probably being the best example of it, what were they really expecting, or I don't know how much attention was paid to the campaign leading up to this, because it seems remarkable. In some ways, it's kind of consistent. In other ways, it's not.
Well, I totally
Yeah.
think it would be because you got to think. So, like you said, Trump said, and we obviously just played that clip. Obviously, Trump never claimed that he was. I think like his intent in that clip was to say that like the JFK and the MLK files, right? But you got to keep in mind also, Kash Patel was running a market campaign about being the FBI director, and it was basically around. I mean, he went on Benny Johnson's show, he went on Glenn Beck's show, he went on pretty much anyone that he could get a microphone in front of him, and said like, "I will release the Epstein files." Why do you think that they aren't released? And it's like, well, because who's on the list, right?
Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. You don't think that Bill Gates is lobbying Congress night and day to prevent the disclosure of that list?
And Dan Bongino, same thing. Pam Bondi, same thing.
People in that report are still fighting to keep their names private. Sean, they have no legal basis to do so unless they're a child, a victim.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review.
So, I mean, I don't think it's out of this world that people were expecting them to release the Epstein files, because they flat out, even if Trump didn't, his cabinet 100% did. 100% those people were saying that they were going to do it. And here's my thing. If they would have never sent out that tweet about the Epstein file saying like, okay, case closed, we're done here, I don't know that this gets any store whatsoever. That is just a total blunder, I think. Just a self-inflicted wound on them. And I can't imagine why they thought that was a good idea. I don't imagine, like, I wouldn't have said that it was going to get this big, because this story, I don't know if you saw any of the Google data on this, but this story has like a 1,200% increase versus last year, like all of last year. So like more people have searched Jeffrey Epstein, Trump-Epstein, stuff like that in the past like 2 weeks than they did all of last year combined. So, so
Well,
this story is huge. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it's picked up this much because it seems that liberals have kind of picked it up a little, mainly because it can be used to attack Trump, basically. But before the events of this past week or so, you could probably say that the whole Epstein conspiracy was kind of right wing coded. You just didn't really have left wingers talking about it. Even though, I mean, as far as people who could be implicated in it goes, I mean, Trump is definitely up there. I mean, in terms of who's been photographed with Epstein the most, there's just a lot of there's a lot of stuff floating around out there that is certainly concerning. So it's surprising that they haven't taken up this cause as much yet. But now that they have, it'll be interesting to see what becomes of it, because now we actually have a competent population of people willing to research it, dig in, and find the truth out about the thing. And maybe some light gets shed on the matter. Now that the liberals have kind of made it their cause as well. It's
Yeah,
quite.
it's very weird. I mean, listen, I as a guy who spends a decent amount of time in the left wing sphere, I can tell you that like they are far less likely to talk about it just because they're far less conspiracy based. Like they're not, they still are, okay, but they're less likely to be like a sensationalism bias with them. So like they're not necessarily just trying to like this would never be like a left winger's identity. But with the right wing, that's not true. What I don't understand, and you help me out here, how is it that the right wing is able to know about Epstein, know about the blackmail, know about the foreign intelligence, but they're somehow oblivious to the fact that Trump was on the Lolita Express, which is Jeffrey Epstein's plane, 7 times. We learned that from the Ghislaine Maxwell case. How are they oblivious to stuff like that? Jeffrey Epstein said that he was Trump's best friend. How are they unaware? I don't know. Maybe it's malice, but I really doubt it because honestly, I think most of these people are just too stupid for that. But I got to be honest here. I just don't know how they're unable to see. So they thought that guy is going to be the one that's going to release the tapes, potentially implicating himself. Even if Trump is in there in a non-incriminating way, he's still going to be in there. And I don't understand the rationalization there. Now, I'm not saying that Kamala would have released him. Are you out of your mind? But it just,
Oh yeah, certainly not.
Kamala's
Uh,
FBI director wouldn't have ran on it though either.
yeah. I've never really. I don't understand the cognitive dissonance in that regard because, I mean, of all people, the big names, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, Trump. I mean, Trump is probably, again, kind of restating it, but he has probably had the most contact with Epstein of all those people. So yeah, you do wonder like why that isn't picked up upon more so by these theorists. I think part of it is just they're in the cult, so they're basically just making themselves blind to it, or maybe there's some rationale like what we discussed last episode where we're like, okay, well, if he was truly in it, then the Democrats would have released it or something. So maybe that's what's going on in their head. I will say though, in Trump's first term, when Epstein first got really popular, like when he apparently killed himself, and that was in the news. I remember, even though all this evidence basically against Trump was out there, I just really paid no mind to it. And that was during a phase in my life where I was far more sycophantic. I was certainly a fanboy of Trump. So, yeah, I don't know like what was going on in my head, because I was aware of it to an extent, but I guess the hive mind got to me and I just dismissed it without even thinking of it critically, which is odd. But I would imagine probably the same thing is going on with much of the base right now and in the past. And one more thing, you mentioned Kash Patel. It is just so funny. Yeah, he makes his whole career basically is based off of conspiracies like these, and he's even written books, about in these topics were included, and only to get in and do nothing about it. So, I mean, the pressures to keep him and Dan Bongino away from releasing these files. It's kind of like what's that movie, Few Good Men? And he did
Oh
that
yeah,
line where
you
can't
can't
handle
handle
the
the
truth.
truth, right?
I'm wondering if it's one of these things. Like, what if the truth is so bad? Maybe that is the calculus. Like, maybe that is like part of it, where it's like if the truth came out, it would be so destabilizing that even if it's bad for one party or the other, they just don't want to release it on that fact alone.
Well, and they are stuck between, especially Kash Patel, like you said. Him and Bondi are just this is a no-win situation for them, because either the entire conspiracy is true and it's worse than we could ever imagine, in which case everyone's hands get dirty, right? Or B, they let's assume that they were being genuine when they were campaigning on this, like, oh my god, it's worse than you can imagine and we have to get in there and release it, the people have to know. And then they get there, and let's just say hypothetically, because it is possible that they get in there and the conspiracy is really not true. Like the intelligence thing is over exaggerated drastically, there really wasn't any major blackmail, and he killed himself. Like, let's just say that that's what's in there, because that is a possibility. Then you just kind of go, oh shit, what do we do now? Because if we release this, they're not even going to believe us. Like they're smart enough to know their own audience, especially like Cash and specifically Bongino. They're smart enough to know that if we release this, they're not going to believe it. They even tried to like soft launch this, if you remember, right? Where they were like, he killed himself. He killed himself, and all that, and people didn't buy it then, and people were pissed off then, and then we were like, okay, well, eventually we're going to get something, right? And then not only did they not do that, they said, hey, by the way, there is no incriminating list. The list never existed. There's no footage or anything like that, or none of this is real. That Epstein never existed, basically, is what they're saying. And it's like, dude, what the hell, man? We elected you. Not me and you, obviously, but the people who voted for Trump and supported Bongino and them, and that they're rightfully upset. I mean, I totally get it. I just, who knows how big the conspiracy actually is? I have no idea.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I'm
I'm
agnostic
sure.
about it. I'm just saying that either way is a nightmare for the Trump administration. Because if it's true and they're holding it, then what the fuck? That's the whole reason we put you in there. And if it's not as big of a deal and you're still withholding it, then you just look like a jackass. But that last part's just my opinion.
Well, I've got to say that would be just incredibly funny if Epstein really didn't kill himself, or really did kill himself, I should say, and basically Kash Patel and all the others, they go in and they're like, oh, I guess there really isn't any more to this story, and then they have to go around and tell the truth, but nobody believes them. That would be fun. I mean, I don't believe him.
If you don't
You
find
know?
the humor in that, if there's not, I don't even, you wouldn't laugh at that. That's hilarious. You know, just
I was gonna say, like, even if more stuff got released, because it's totally possible that maybe there's not a list per se created by Epstein, but perhaps there's just a wealth of evidence that could be released where people could go in and like sofa sleuths, or I don't know what the online detectives, I guess they could compile a list of their own based on the documentation provided.
yeah. Listen, I'm sure that we could find some way to get the truth out of this thing, and I think the easiest way to do that. And again, I'm not like an investigative guy. Like I'm not a detective, right? But Ghislaine Maxwell is still alive, so it seems totally in her favor here. The problem is, sorry, I did not mean in her favor. It seems totally like coincidental that she's alive and we can ask her. The problem with asking her is that it would be totally in her favor to lie and to, gin up anything that she can say that think might help her hurt or help whoever put her in there, So I
Oh,
like,
yeah.
so if you put a microphone in front of Maxwell, she could say anything, and there's no way to know if it's the truth because they won't release the files. So they're not going to do that, unfortunately, and they're actually trying. I saw that I can't remember which news outlet was trying to interview her and get her on the record because she's trying to be on the record about this, and they told her absolutely not, absolutely not.
Yeah, that would be insane if I saw that, yeah, she's wanting to testify before Congress or something. That would be the story of the year. I feel like, well, I don't know, with this news cycle, it'd probably be the story of the month, but it would still be insane. And I would love to hear what she says, even though, you'd have to take it all with a grain of salt because for her, the calculus is probably to make Trump look as good as possible and then make all his enemies look kind of bad. And then, maybe she could get some leniency from him in the future, which I think is totally possible. He made some remark about her where he ended it with, "Oh, I wish her well." I don't
Oh,
remember
about
when that.
Maxwell.
Yeah,
That was
Jelaine.
in oh, sorry. That was in 2020. That's before the election. Which is odd, isn't it? That's just odd.
Yeah.
What an odd
I
thing to
mean,
say.
they did know each other. Here's something crazy. What if she gets a pardon on Trump's way out? Wouldn't that be something? But I could see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things that like if they don't release the files and they do this pardon trick, and I hate speculating about this because like I don't think it'll happen, but if they did that, that would be insane, right? But people would believe it. Like the cult would fall right back in line, and they'd be like, "Oh, look." I swear, it's like these cultists, though, man. It's like these Benny Johnson, these Matt Walsh types. These people. They think that it was just Clintons, Pelosi's, and like Raskins in the Epstein files, and I'm like, you guys are absolutely ridiculous. The idea that Trump wasn't implicated is just nuts, and they rationalize it however they do. But it's like, come on, like.
Oh yeah, of all people, I've got to say, unfortunately, I mean, he looks the most guilty of pretty much
Well, and
everyone.
especially now he's raging out about it. Like he's freaking out about it. I mean, Darren, at Turning Point USA, I mean that's like the second biggest conference of the year outside of CPAC, right? And
Hmm.
the only thing that they can talk about is the Epstein files. Steve Bannon is talking about it. Charlie Kirk is talking about it. Megyn Kelly's talking about it. I mean, you can't shut these people up. And they're literally, it's the only time when Trump's been involved in politics where Trump would be openly booed at a Turning Point USA conference. It's the only time. And then that Truth Social post where he basically goes off and basically says Obama made the Epstein files, which that actually literally can't be true because the timeline doesn't line up. The Epstein files didn't even start till Trump was in office. But sidelining that fact, when he tweeted that, like it got ratioed. You know, like there were people in the comments saying, like, dude, this is a bad look. You got to stop.
Yeah, and that's surprising because pretty much only the cultists are on Truth Social. I mean, you really don't have anyone else other than that on that site, because otherwise they would go to Twitter or Threads, Blue Sky, something like that. But yeah, to get ratioed on his own site by his own most ardent supporters, it's a bad sign, and if it continues, he's certainly in hot water. I know people in real life that aren't going to change their opinion on him because of this, but there's a substantial portion that they're mad that he's reneging on a lot of his promises. Another one that's happened this week is the Russia-Ukraine thing, where and look, you know me, I'm pro-Ukraine, so this is a development that I am in favor of, certainly. But Trump is greenlighting defensive weaponry to Ukraine. And he's going to try and he's going to put more pressure on Putin. So this war doesn't seem like it's going to be wrapping up anytime soon.
Yeah, I do wonder. I do feel like all of this, by the way, is like somewhat of a distraction from like he is trying to get the news cycle off of this. Like he tweeted something about deporting Rosie O'Donnell because he didn't even realize that she doesn't even live in America anymore. And he's tweeting about Obama or truthing about Obama, and now he's signing a Ukraine arms deal. Like, okay, that's convenient, but to stick on the arms deal, I do wonder. There were talks when him and Zelensky were on good terms at the very beginning that he might greenlight a strike, an offensive strike on Russian soil. If that happens, this war could very much escalate, increasing like obviously the cost of lives and the cost of the United States. Because if we green light a offensive war, like a strike on Russian soil, it will almost certainly come with an assurance, like a security guarantee that if shit hits the fan, we're gonna help you out with whatever.
I've got to say though, I'm in terms of Russia, my thinking has changed on this a lot in the last few years. I'm more in favor of putting a lot of pressure on Putin, and giving the Ukrainians anything and everything they need. I think honestly, I liked the Biden policy, but I think he should have gone farther. I think he should have just instead of pussyfooting around, he should have just given them like lethal aid as quick as possible. Forget just defensive stuff. Just arm them to the teeth and see what plays out. Because, and I get, hindsight is 2020, but back when this war started, I was like, okay, within a few weeks, the Russians will have taken Kiev, and it'll pretty much all be over. And it's sad for the Ukrainians, but the Russians are they're a real world power, so it's going to be no contest. But as it turns out, as long as the Ukrainians are receiving a pretty steady supply of weaponry, and mainly just defensive weaponry that they can do. They can stave off the invasion pretty well on their own. So if we would have given them more stuff, more deadly stuff quicker, we might have seen a real different outcome as of today. I mean, maybe they would have pushed into Russia even and taken some stuff for bargaining chips.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's totally impossible that with both U.S. equipment, U.S. weapons, and U.S. intelligence, I think is the big one, that it's possible that Ukraine could have pushed inside of Russia. But I got to be honest with you, Darren, they couldn't have pushed in very far. And I don't think that they would have been able to hold it. Like, there's no scenario where Ukraine, given the entire equipment of the United States military, could just push into like Moscow, right? But potentially they could have made this war way more of a cost for Putin. And I'm not going to say that that's not possible. I'm just saying that I still don't know if I buy it. You know, the only way I would support an offensive is that if the goal there was to like get a ceasefire and then ultimately a peace deal, which I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure that an offensive plan would incentivize Putin to make a peace deal because Putin has to be able to sell this thing to his people. So if you make him negotiate from a position of weakness, he's way less willing to actually negotiate in good faith. So,
Well, the Ukrainians, didn't they take the Kursk region or of Russia? So it was a pretty small little segment. You know, it was right on the Ukrainian border, and I think since you might have to fact check me on this, but I think since the Ukrainians have been pushed out ever since this pause on aid by the U.S., but they have demonstrated that they can get a little bit of Russian territory at least. And I think if we could do that again, even though their numbers have diminished, maybe that could be a bargaining chip in the future if they could get these small little pockets of Russian territory, even if they're not, high population zones. Just the fact that it's Russian territory, that would be, something to hold over Putin's head. But yeah, I think the Ukrainians are very capable, and also in another respect, even beyond just Ukraine, I kind of just see Putin as this like third worldist thug. He basically just opposes like Western interests everywhere. Like even in Africa, he's doing this. I would love to see him toppled or yeah, I just don't see any value that Putin provides. And I think it is a little risky because he has nukes, but I don't think he'd ever use them because I think he knows like, if he uses them then he's going to get wiped out. So and all the Russian people will be as well. So
yeah, I
I
don't
think
think he's that dumb. I don't think he's that crazy.
I mean he's definitely bold and daring, but I don't think he's like suicidal. Like I don't think even if his back was to the wall and like American and Ukrainian troops were storming the Kremlin, I think he would just take it. I don't think he'd use his nukes or anything. I think he'd just die.
Yeah, if you're asking me, like, who do you think is more likely to fire nuclear armaments? I feel like the answer is Trump. I mean, wasn't that the argument? They were saying that we might have to nuke that mountain in Iran, just to make sure we get the missile site. I mean, they didn't end up, but I'm just saying that like that was on the table versus like with a guy like Putin. I feel like nukes are almost, they might technically not be off the table, but they're practically off the table.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird because I'm just kind of like basing my speculation off like their demeanor, but I do think Putin is certainly a rational actor, even if even if I'm not a fan of his. So, but Trump, on the other hand, I feel like there's almost like a slight obsession Trump has with nukes. I think he honestly wants to use it, and he would probably like the opportunity to feel justified in doing so. I feel like it almost like inspires like fear in him, but also like he has like this morbid curiosity about them because he's mentioned nukes quite a bit in the past, and I believe one of his family members was a scientist of some, perhaps a physicist or a nuclear scientist, and
Hmm.
he's gone on spiels before where he talks about nukes and links. So I think he is fascinated by them, and Trump and his ego, he would probably love to be one of the few people in history to ever drop nukes.
Yeah, I doubt he will. I'll be honest with you, but would it? I think he wants history in a different way. I really do, in his own way. And as crazy as this might sound, I think he wants to be generally known as a peacemaker, a guy who made deals for peace. Despite the fact that like brinksmanship is like almost like peace through war, right? you know,
Yeah.
it's not. It's whatever. It doesn't make any sense to me that he would use a nuke. I just think it goes counter to what he wants to be remembered for. And if nothing else, the man is motivated by self-interest. So I don't think there's no way he would, unless his back was, unless he had to, then he wouldn't. But I don't think he's like dying to use nukes unless it's a imminent threat, a real imminent threat.
I don't know. To me, with Trump, it seems like his position is just basically what his mood is for the day. Like, you know, because I mean, even just this reversal on policy on Ukraine, where now he's greenlighting defensive weaponry. I mean, there's no consistency. It's one day we're doing this, one day we're not. You almost can't help but wonder, maybe his like campaign promises from like 2016, maybe that was just on a whim, like because it, you know, if you took his rhetoric in 2016, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this guy is going to get out, every, uh, every Latin immigrant that's come over the border, but you look at the policy today, and then even to an extent in the first term, and it's like, oh well, we're going to spare farm and hospitality workers, and we're going to mainly focus on criminals, and and basically that. I mean, with the that's kind of been the program. It's gotten a little more intense lately, but then it's kind of gone back. So I feel like the policy just changes with his mood, just whatever he's feeling in the moment. There's no consistency.
Well, he definitely doesn't have an ideology, which is part of what makes him so dangerous. So the guy is running his deportations and much of his domestic policy is actually Stephen Miller, which I know you know, but most of our audience, most of the people out there, they're like, who is Stephen Miller? They have no idea who this is. But this is the guy that led the initiative that was like, why are we going after just criminals? Why aren't we going after Home Depot employees? Why aren't we going after immigrants in churches and schools and colleges and all of that? And Trump may catch wind of some of this stuff and be like, wait, no, 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 no. But my point here is this, is that Trump is, because he's not really that hard pressed on the details of the policy, he just wants a win. Like, do you think he had any idea what was in the big, beautiful bill? Absolutely not. He just knew that he wanted a couple, two to three things that here's what I want, and everything else, I'm just going to declare it as victory and make, because like you said in a previous episode, like it's either, weak or strong. And, for him, that's an easy choice.
Yeah, and speaking of changes in policy and fluctuations, even though this was kind of what he wanted originally from the outset, it seems as though tariffs are back on the table all of a sudden out of nowhere. So that was bad news that I received this past week. And I guess like 20 to 30 trading partners have now been threatened with more tariffs. And I believe the deadline is like August 1st, unless they sign trade deals. But the thing is, Trump, like, he doesn't even have like a trade deal in mind. Like, these countries will be like, okay, what do you want? And he won't have anything. So I don't even like know.
Yeah, and just to clarify that up for the audience, I mean that's insane. So here's basically what's happening, right? So Trump is going to, let's just pick the EU, right? And he's like, "Hey, you don't buy enough shit in the United States. We want you to buy more stuff in the United States. Um, we're gonna put what is it, right? A 30% tariff. It changes on the day, right? But we're gonna put a 30% tariffs
It's
on you
something
unless you, yeah. So we're just gonna put a ridiculously high tariff on you guys." And they're like, okay, well, let's start negotiating. And then the United States won't pick up their phone calls. The United States won't respond to their envoys. They won't do anything. And then Trump's like, the EU has not been responding to anything we've said, so we're going to lap another 30% on. And they're like, dude, what? And then they finally enter into negotiations. And the EU is like, okay, so like, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to buy more steel? Do you want us to, like, what do you want us to do? And they're like, we don't have any specific demands. And it's like, okay, how are we supposed to negotiate at all? Like how is this even supposed to happen? Like, what if we reduce our tariffs? And they're like, that would not affect our tariffs. Okay, what if we bought more of your United States steel or United States products? That would not affect our. Okay, well then what would, or is nothing going to? And they don't have an answer. It's just pure chaos.
Oh yeah, and it's very worrisome because like it's almost I mean, it could be just total craziness and incompetence, but you almost wonder if like these like talks are just designed to fail, and then when they do inevitably fail, maybe on August 1st, Trump will just state, "Oh, well, talks fell through. We couldn't come to a deal, so now we're levying these tariffs." Maybe that's what he wants. Maybe that's why it seems so crazy. Maybe I'm like assigning like a degree of rationality where it doesn't exist, but that's a theory. It could be that. Uh, on the other hand, I will say, tariffs have increased and over this year ever since April, and um, I haven't really noticed like anything major yet in terms of price increases at like the grocery store. In my job, I won't say what we're buying because I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I have seen tariff surcharges on invoices now from stuff bought overseas. But they don't seem too bad yet. Yeah, it's interesting. Even though these tariffs have been put into effect largely, with the average effective U.S. tariff rate being like 16.6%. That's a stat I wrote down from the New York Times. I really haven't noticed anything too notable in my personal life, so I'd be interested when the CPI numbers come out month over month, what the change has been, because I really haven't felt a material change. So it seems like the suppliers are eating quite a bit of the cost as of now. So that is interesting. Maybe, hopefully that continues to be the trend, because if these tariffs increase, hopefully it'll just be eaten by the importer. That's my hope.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It's going to be eaten by the importer. Listen, these tariffs, they haven't really been kicked in for very long. Like you got to keep in mind, he pushed them back, and even the ones he put on China and Vietnam and the UK. I mean, they're not. It's not like it's not like they've been sat in for 90 days, right? Like they've sat in for a month. Like I can tell you as a guy, and I won't go into like huge detail, but as a guy who sells a lot of things from China and Vietnam, specifically those two, I can tell you we have seen like, drastic price increases. It's just the way it is. Now, that only works for stuff, and I don't know if you saw this, but Amazon, their Prime Day was not that long ago. Their numbers were not at all what they were hoping it would be. It's down almost like 40%. We do get the Q2
Yeah.
numbers at the end of July. That will determine, because you got to remember in Q1 we actually shrank 0.2%. Um, if this quarter is also negative GDP, then we will have officially been living in a recession, which does not mean that it's necessarily bad, right? Well, I mean, it is bad, like by definition. But what I'm saying is it's not like catastrophic. It's not apocalyptic, you know? Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. People hear recession and they almost immediately go to depression. And that's just not what it is. For our viewers, uh, a recession is just two consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. So it's really not something to be too worried about because it's pretty much inevitable that it's going to happen every few years. Really, we're going to have at least one. So, expecting permanent upward growth is a fantasy. It's got to go up and down. It's got to fluctuate. But
right. And well, and
I mean, if it can be avoided, though, it should be. In my opinion, like this is self-inflicted. So that I guess that's the difference.
right. And luckily, we have not seen a huge cut in jobs since these tariffs have started kicking in. Or at least we haven't even seen that many jobs in preparation for the tariffs. It seems like most business leaders are deciding that they're just going to pause or get rid of long-term investments. So, like for example, if they were going to build a new factory in Ohio, and with this tariff situation, maybe we just go ahead and scrap that, take that money, and make sure that we're just secure for the next 4 years because this is going to be a rocky ship. That's an example. So that does lower economic activity, but that's not cataclysmic. You know what I mean? Like that's not the country will survive. You know,
Oh yeah, and
as long as it doesn't get worse. As long as it doesn't get worse.
yeah, speaking of lowered economic activity, I think maybe something that's also kind of stifling inflation is I've seen some numbers and I should have written them down, but I've seen that consumer activity has been decreasing. Like people are just buying, consumer spending, I should say. People are just buying less. So, maybe that's also contributing to the somewhat lower feel of the inflation, even if tariffs are rising. So yeah, it'll be interesting as these years, as the next 3.5 years go by, what the CPI will be. It'll be interesting to look at these numbers and see how bad it hits. Maybe it doesn't hit as bad as my worst fears. I sure hope so, but we'll see. I have a feeling that whoever assumes office in 2020, after the election of 2028, will probably reverse a lot of these tariffs, and it's my assumption that business leaders, like you kind of said, are factoring this in, and they're just gonna kind of hold their money for until the crisis abates, and then things will go back to business as usual.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like if you were a business owner right now, I would just keep as much cash on hand as you can, and I would, try and I wouldn't make any plans based on this administration's word. I'll be honest with you. I mean, you got to think what 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when he dealt the USMCA. I mean, he's basically ripped that up, took a big shit all over it, and it's like, dude, like, what if you made a business decision based on that agreement, and then the same guy is in 4 years later, and what he's gonna completely rip it apart and make you rebuild a manufacturing plant? Yeah, I just not good for business what's happening. So I just wish that we could at least, I mean, in either scenario where you either commit to tariffs or you commit to no tariffs, businesses will have stability to plan around, right? But when there is instability, that's just going to lower economic activity, which at a macro level will mean that, efficiency will go down the toilet, and that, it just leads to job cuts, higher prices, stagflation, basically. Um, it's, just don't let the time bomb go off. Just please God, just get it under control. Pick a lane.
Oh yeah, at least maybe there could be an upside of you know it, if we almost enter like a deflationary phase and like consumer spending just keeps decreasing, maybe interest rates would finally be lowered and maybe I could refinance some debt that I've been wanting to do. So that would be nice. I could see a timeline in which that occurs, but uh, yeah, I don't know though. It's all pretty fraught no matter what because there's so many cons even with that little pro. If people aren't buying stuff, that's going to be really bad. Also, I mean, it's going to be bad for the job market too. I mean, these companies with all this uncertainty, they're not going to want to do any extra hiring. I mean, we'll be lucky if they just keep
Well,
their higher levels what they were. So
interesting thing you mentioned there about hiring, and you just reignited a spark that I was reading earlier. College educated unemployment is actually on the rise. It's almost at 6%, which for college educated Americans is actually one of the highest it's been in our lifetime. It's kind of unbelievable to be that high. Typically, college educated Americans are the most productive, reliable workforce in the country. They just always have a job. They just, why that is, don't get me lying to you. That just seems to be the stats, but it's rapidly increasing. And a lot of what these economists are figuring that is that these these companies are not hiring emptied positions and they're not refilling entry level jobs, right? So, which is a little bit of a concern. Like I said, this is not apocalyptic. I'm just saying that, like, at a macro level, when you do this, you end up, more people than ever are graduating college, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They're about to unpause the student loans, and they're about to be jobless. So,
yeah, that is a somewhat concerning number because honestly, you would hope that number was closer to 3 or 4%. I believe that's what our
right.
economics professor told us. So yeah, it's maybe not double, but it's nearly double what it should be. So that is concerning. Yeah, that it's certainly bad for anyone looking for a job right now. I mean, and also anecdotally, this is pure anecdote, so I don't know how much weight we can put on it, but I have seen, because I browse Reddit from time to time. I've seen these Redditors, they're like kvetching that this is like the worst the job market has been in a long time. People just sending out tons of applications and just getting no real responses. And I would assume that the demographic that uses Reddit is primarily college educated. That's at least the vibe I get whenever I use it. But that might be the reason I'm getting this vibe from that app right now.
Oh, gotcha. Well, interesting. Yeah, I do think it's definitely concerning. You know, you've got one of the most productive workforces in the country, and it's like they're struggling to find jobs. Like you're talking about the most educated people, the people who could literally go work for pretty much anywhere. You know, they're qualified at least to go work for any company in the world, and they're struggling to find jobs, which is that is concerning. But who knows? Like, just because there's a rise in unemployment doesn't always mean that it's bad. Like, you know, because that just means that maybe your workforce is getting bigger, maybe more people are searching for jobs. It could mean a number of things, but I'm just saying that when you factor it in with all the context of the tariffs and AI and all these disruptors to the entry level jobs, it is concerning. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And if it goes another few points higher, that's really scary territory. Because I believe in 2008, I believe and now I think this was total unemployment, so this wasn't just the college educated sector. But in 2008, I believe it was 10%, and that was the Great Recession. That was a very, destabilizing event. So hopefully things get corrected. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I am interested to see how these numbers will be as the year goes on. It'll definitely paint us. It'll definitely tell us a story of how these policies are affecting the country. But I would say to our viewers, just hang on tight, and stay calm, because in 3.5 years, I imagine whoever comes next will probably be more sensible on these matters.
Yeah, I do wonder how this will implicate 2026 and 2028. Because it seems like Democrats have not had their reckoning moment internally, so should be interesting to see how they do that. Because obviously Cuomo is running against Mamdani, despite the fact that Mamdani beat him in the primary. And I'm sure Cuomo is being forced to by his billionaire donors in an attempt to save the city or whatever, but it's the polling shows that it's not going to work. Which, if that's true, Darren, then it's pretty clear which direction the people want us to go, and it's just whether or not the DNC does it. But, which I know your feelings about that, but
yeah, I just don't think the moneyed elite are gonna let the DNC deviate too much from the course they've been on. I mean, otherwise, that's essentially why Hillary won in over Bernie the first time. Uh, I mean, she had the establishment behind her, and I still think the establishment is king, at least for the Democrat, at least for the time being. I don't know, maybe the dynamics will change, but I don't know if I see like I don't know if I see such a like AOC type figure coming in 2028. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know.
yeah, 2028 may as well be, Neptune from now. Like let's just get to the midterms first, dude. Just oh boy, you know. By that point, Trump won't be able to run away from his record and blame Biden. If we're 2 years in and you're still blaming Biden, we're gonna have a problem, and it will not go over well. So, should be interesting. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen?